Colin Stokes, welcome to Tales from the Block. I am really excited that you will be my guest today, and I'm looking forward. I'm looking forward talking about out of hours issues that you are guys covering. So please introduce yourself and tell the listeners, what do you do?
Yeah, so I'm Colin Stokes. I'm the managing director of Adiuvo, which is a company that's been around in the block management space for about 17, 18 years now. And we provide specialist out of hours assistance for property portfolios and property managers. And basically, we take calls when all our clients are shut. We triage the incoming calls that are supposed to be emergencies, decide whether they are or not, and then manage those emergencies until our clients reopen their doors, whether that be the next day after a weekend or after a Christmas holiday or something like that.
And you also cover daytime, right? Not just
Yeah, I mean, we do.
afternoon.
It's a much smaller part of our business. Our core business is definitely the out of hours, but we do provide in hours maintenance desks and kind of like overflow call handling and stuff like that for our clients as well. Tends to be the smaller ones that we do that for, but
Hmm.
yeah, it's a smaller part of our business. But we are, as the sign behind me says, open 24/7. So
Yeah.
it's just a reminder in case I ever walk into my office and forget we're open every day. We're open every hour.
But let's talk about life after 5 o'clock, right? Tell us more about the role and what types of emergency you typically cover.
Well, I guess there's a standard amount of things. I mean, generally speaking, what we're supposed to be here for is any possible damage to our client's asset and any health or safety problem that might affect the residents in it. That can run from leaks to access problems to some weird and wonderful stuff that I'm sure we might cover
Yeah.
during the course of the conversation. But we are here to look after and make sure that both the buildings and the people within them are safe when their normal property manager is not available and having a well-deserved rest.
How did you get in? How did you get into this business?
So
17
I
years ago.
I
Wow. Long
know.
time.
I'm an ex-property manager myself. So first started out in lettings management, moved to block management, worked for a company that's still my client to this day, actually.
Good.
So, but yes, so I was a block manager. Back in the old days, God, everybody that knows me has heard this story so many times. But back in the old days, we used to take turns on call. I did. Um, and you used to have, because it was a long time ago, we used to have smartphones, but not really that smartphones in those days. And we used to have a rolled up kind of spreadsheet in the other pocket. And we used to take a week at a time. We used to take the phone and we used to have to deal with any emergencies, not just on our own portfolios, but across, everything basically. And therefore, one time when I was on call and I was getting kind of multiple calls in, the idea kind of came that maybe there should be a better way of doing it, and that hopefully there could be a way of doing it where residents and callers got the same kind of level of expertise. Out of hours as they did in hours, rather than just a generic kind of messaging center or
Yeah.
messaging service, that it would actually be someone that knew what hopefully they were talking about, to be able to provide that assistance to people that were calling.
So you started with lettings. You still do lettings, right? You cover a lot
Yeah,
of it,
so
not
we
just.
somehow in 18 years now manage 1,072,073,000 units out of ours, which is everything from lettings to commercial and block. Block is definitely the biggest part of that. We probably have about 800,000 block units, something around
Wow.
there, about 175,000 letting units maybe, and then some weird and wonderful stuff. We have schools, we have commercial units, we have a few, whatever anyone asks us to look after as an emergency. Block still is there and has been from day one, and still been the biggest part of our portfolio.
Yeah, you must manage all types of blocks and flats and properties in your
E-
portfolio.
Everything from an HMO in, not picking on it, in Edinburgh, to one property that is just around the corner from Harrods, which is £35,000 a week in rent, where we only ever speak to the housekeeper. And Harrods is where they do their local shopping. Um, and so it is everything and everything in between. Blocks that,
Yeah.
a conversion of, into a block of three,
Yeah.
to sites with 700 units on them, if not more, to estates where we only look after the common areas, not the properties themselves, the kind of single family stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, every type of property, commercial buildings, yeah, anything and everything, and as I mentioned, a couple of schools as well.
Yeah. Okay. And commercial. And you cover UK and Northern Ireland, right? This.
Yeah, UK and Southern Ireland, actually. We have clients
Oh.
over here because I think most people know this, but myself and most of the management team are based here in Ireland, and that's where most of our property management staff are based. We have another office in the UK. Most of our inbound and customer service people are do there. But yeah, we have everything from literally Land's End to John O'Groats. Well, John O'Groats is probably a little bit far actually, but we don't
Amazing.
quite go up that high. But yeah, we have everything throughout the UK.
And talking about the types of emergencies calls that you're getting, what are kind of the top three?
Well, we publish our stats every year to kind of like let people know what we're doing, but it's not going to surprise anybody that's listening to this that works in block management. Leaks and plumbing is number one
Yeah.
by a long way, almost. I think it's probably about almost by about 40% higher than anything else. So escape of water, plumbing issues, roof leaks. If you group all those, if you group any water ingress in together as a group, then I think probably not only is it about 40% bigger than anything else that we do, it's probably about a sixth of what we do completely and utterly.
Am I reading it correctly from your brochure, which I tried to include in the podcast, that it's just over 12,000 calls on the
Yeah,
leaks and
something like that
God,
last year, and the next biggest then again with some grouping together, fire alarms, smoke alarms, AOVs, that kind of thing comes in second place. Access issues is a little bit behind that, and then lifts, I think, in fourth place. Again, anybody that manages a building won't be surprised about the lifts one.
yeah,
So I think we did almost 4,000 lifts last year,
amazing.
from things like that.
I didn't think alarms and AOVs and then access. Interesting to see that.
Uh, I think sometimes people don't always bother reporting some things out of hours, but one thing you can guarantee that they'll be doing is if they hear a beeping alarm or an alarm in full sounding mode, then you're certainly going to get calls and you're going to certainly deal with them. And I think given recent and not so recent events, people are much more attuned to
Yeah,
those issues now. So even if we're getting alarms that are showing just a fault maybe out of hours, they're not actually sounding. People are correctly
yeah,
reporting them because they
yeah,
have the worries that the system might not sound if there was a true one. So it is both from the nuisance point of view when it goes off, because typically it goes off at 2 o'clock in the morning, obviously,
yeah,
and that's always fun when you do that in a large building of about 100 because you'll get about 50 or 60 calls in a short space of time at 2 o'clock in the morning out of nowhere. But
yeah,
yeah, we do get a lot of calls for those because I think
yeah.
yeah,
And you
people are
just
attuned.
reset, and you basically your contractors just reset rather than so then the next day they call the maintenance company and they
Yeah,
establish
now
the issue.
obviously with communal alarms, we won't let any of the residents go anywhere
Yeah,
near it, and we definitely
yeah,
tell them not to reset it because they don't know what they're doing and they don't know why. And also, I mean, with that one, we have a lot of conversations with residents who say, "Oh, it's beeping or the alarm's going off," but there's no sign of any problem. And then you realise that you're talking to somebody that's living in a 200 plus unit
yeah,
site, and they couldn't possibly know every area or be close enough to any area to be affected. So we have a few arguments with
yeah,
people about calling fire brigades when things are sounding and
yeah,
things like that.
yeah,
Um, and also I just think that quite often, yeah, people are very very wary of and they don't understand. So we do have to get
Yeah.
contractors out, and contractors need to, most times our clients, and this is probably something we'll cover as well, will have told us who the alarm engineers are. So, and
Mhm.
most alarms are under a contract, or at least in my
Yes.
opinion, definitely
Yes.
should be under a
Yes.
contract.
Yes.
Because and therefore we're just then managing them to go to the site, and perhaps it is reset, perhaps it's isolate the odd sounder or the odd sensor so that the system's back in service. We rely on sometimes their overview. Occasionally, we have, if we're not provided with that information, and the council get involved about the noise nuisance and alarms going off, and we have to send someone to go and check the whole site to make sure there isn't a problem. But yeah, occasionally we'll have to turn the sounder off. So it does depend on the
Yeah.
circumstances somewhat.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also like making sure that you understand what the error is, or your contractors, because is it evacuation time, or is it's all good, go back to sleep? So
Absolutely, yeah,
yeah,
100%.
yeah. Going back to leaks,
Hmm.
I'm actually going to have someone on the podcast talking about escape of water, but again, I can only assume that more than half of the calls could have waited, or were not communal, maybe not
Yeah,
established at the moment. Tell me a little bit more about the leak.
absolutely, absolutely. From a point of view, so as an overarching statistic, we only instruct on about 36% of all the calls that we receive. So two-thirds of what we do
Mm,
is with knowledge and politely, I hope, on both counts,
yeah,
telling people that that isn't actually something that needs dealing with immediately, and or is not our client's responsibility. So people, as again, anybody watching this that's got any background in block management won't be surprised to know, unfortunately, some people that buy flats don't understand what isn't their responsibility,
yep,
um, and don't understand that things primarily within the demise of their property will be their responsibility. Now, obviously,
yeah,
there are caveats to that, and stack pipes that go through a bit through an individual's property. Some
yeah,
definitely are our problem, if the problem is in the stack pipe itself. And there can be some kind of heating and cooling systems that belong to the building that there. But on the whole, yeah, it's about almost two-thirds of the calls we get across the whole portfolio. We have to say no to people. Report their washing machines leaking when it's a leasehold property, and people that. So there's a lot of education sometimes that
yes,
is never that well received at like 3 o'clock in the morning when they've got water coming
yep,
into their property or out of their thing, or their U bend is leaking and they think that should be somebody's responsibility but not their own. So
yeah,
unfortunately, as I said, as we all know, a lot of times we get calls from there, and then people do over-report things. And I
yes,
understand it because people panic, and it's their property. It's not just their property; it's their home. It's where they live, and that's
yeah,
the one problem that we always have. We're not just talking about physical assets here, are
yeah.
we? We're talking about
They're trying
people's
to help
homes.
and prevent, obviously, further damages
They
in the
are.
future. So
We do a lot of checking by photos and video requests. So we do get a lot of people that report they've got a flood coming in from the flat above, and when you actually drill into it, and then you eventually ask for, kind of some proof, what you get is like one drip every 10 seconds or something. And
yeah,
and if for example it's from a flat, likely from a flat above, and that flat isn't there, or it's from a roof and we're already past darkness, we're literally not going to be able to do anything that
no,
night.
yeah,
One, the roof is not safe to access in darkness,
yeah,
and it's not worth it for that level of problem. And also, it's not at the level where we'd even think about forcing access to a property when you can, as the
yeah.
phrase we use, manage and monitor the leak overnight.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've mentioned earlier something about like having different types of systems, maybe that are more prone to call outs, and what the in terms of leaks, and when you have communal systems, heating systems, and boilers, and Is that happening a lot as well?
The So the fancier the building, sometimes the more that can go wrong with it. And when it does go wrong, it's a big problem. So,
Yeah,
you have like a little 10-bed purpose-made block of flat, even a converted 10
yeah,
bed kind of block of flats or whatever, and everyone's got their own individual boilers, and there's no fancy AOVs. There is a fire alarm, but there's no automatic opening vents or anything like that. And they seem to fail a lot less, or maybe it's just bias, because when the bigger ones do fail, it's usually the fancy stuff is all in the 100 unit blocks and the 50 unit blocks, and the communal boiler goes down, or the communal or the district heating system goes down, or something like that. They seem to be a little bit more susceptible. And can I say that maybe we don't build buildings like we used to?
no,
And
oh,
that
I totally agree.
at the turn of the century, last century, not this one, just gone, mansion blocks in, I don't know, Cadogan Square seem to have held up a lot more and some of the flats that are thrown up only 5 years ago or something. And
Yeah,
there was a conversation at one of the events I was at this week there, where managers had conversations with developers that say they kind of build for just three mortgage life cycles of a building,
yeah,
and that's it, 75 years.
yeah.
Whereas all that stuff around Pont Street in central London is going to be there probably long long after us.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's also with leaks there is a lot of appliances leaks, and I think in your stats is kind of the at the bottom from what I can see, which is something that I've dealt a lot in, and that's why, like, for me it's leaks in appliances. Not so much alarms and AOVs, but appliances has been. So I will be speaking to people that are in lettings and deal with tenants and landlords, because we need to make changes in there as well. And I recently, over a year ago, we were called in around 12:30 midnight, after midnight, and then there was this leak coming from the top of the building to the top floor, um, to three flats down, and they were all had like the period cornices inside, and they were damaged. And it just, at the end, it was a boiler that was not fit properly. So,
Yeah.
and then everyone
We've
obviously
had the same with washing machines and things of those nature, and nothing that the building even has any control over, nothing that the property manager has control over, because it's
yeah,
happened within the demise of the flat, and then the flat, poor workmanship or cheap workmanship, and people, and then the whole
yeah,
building suffers. Yeah.
yeah. And the quickest answer is, oh, just go through the building insurance. And yeah, but we need to look at a bit more in depth here, because it's the fitters, whoever fitted your boiler, and then it's, you're going to claim for your laminate flooring or wooden flooring, whatever you have, and then going down three flats and covering damages. And oh, it was months and months of work. But again, it's one of those things. Washing machine, um, dishwashers, and with tenants, mainly tenanted properties, it's the bathrooms, bathtubs and shower trays not siliconed and done
Yeah.
properly. They are mainly the
Misusing
cause
of
of leaks.
toilets, and disposing things down toilets they shouldn't be, and all of
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Yeah.
We often have a conversation with directors about it, because they're like, well, how do we handle this? Because we can't always put these through building insurance. But when the property that is affected, they're like, oh, no, it has to go through building insurance. But then you are the cause of this issue. So not only the properties below are affected, but then the policy, is increasing every year, just because your your property was neglected,
Yeah, and there'll
kind
be
of
the
thing.
same people that are complaining when the access goes up to like £5,000 or £10,000 on every water escape. Great.
Yeah. Well, it will be interesting conversation with the Escape of Water company that is coming to talk about. But 17 years in 18 years almost in this industry and covering out of hours, you must have a lot of stories to tell. But anything that it's kind of the moment someone said, "Tell me a story," and it just comes to mind. Tell me one or two of
Again, a
them.
few people probably have heard this one. If anyone ever says, "Tell me a story," there's one that always comes out. Uh, there's a more serious one I could do to give you like a proper indication of what we have to do sometimes, but the one that always comes out is a fire alarm that went off at 2 o'clock in the morning, and a gentleman calling us to report it. Absolutely insistent, kind of like we were referring to earlier, that there was no fire in the building, and
Mm.
we give them the usual response of say you can't possibly know that, unfortunately. We'll need to call the fire brigade to make sure. It's a large block. I can see that from the information in front of me. And then the gentleman had to explain that he knew it was not a real fire alarm, because what had happened is that him and his partner, uh, excuse me, had an argument in their flat. It started off when they had both been in bed, and it progressed to the flat. They got out of bed. They were carrying on the argument, and in the end, the partner had got so annoyed with him that she had um, physically ejected him from the flat into the common parts. Now, because of where the problem had started and the argument had started and the time of night it was, he was not wearing any clothes.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Oh.
And then she lit a cigarette on purpose, held it up to the sensor within her flat to bring
No.
all her neighbours out into the building. And therefore they did. And the poor man, well, I don't know. He might have. I see that we don't always get to hear the full story. He may well have deserved it. I do not know. But then the
Still.
gentleman was left there in the common parts, naked, until one of his neighbours took pity on him and provided him with a towel. So that one's the one that always comes to mind. It wasn't the fact that he'd ended up there; it was the added step of purposely bringing people out by setting the alarm
Yeah.
off.
But
That
what do you
was
do? Handing him a dressing gown,
a,
you know?
a towel I think he got from one of his
Yeah, I
neighbours.
bet.
Well,
Yeah.
while we, but I think it took at least it took like an hour and a half to get the alarm contractor there to silence the alarm as well.
Wow.
So interesting. I
And
mean, go on.
no, it's like the alarm beeping for like an hour and then
Yeah,
he's still not let in the flat. Wow.
yeah. Again, we never get to the. That's the only downside of doing what we do. We never get to sometimes hear the end of these stories because
Mm.
we have to hand back the circumstances to our clients. I
Yeah.
mean, the other one that comes to mind that from a slightly more serious point of view was a major burst to a building on the incoming mains that went on over a bank holiday, and we had to rehouse like 39 flats, alternative
Oh,
accommodation,
wow.
as well as coordinate with the emergency service and the fire brigade, because the burst was cataclysmic. It was like it literally, thousands of tons of water came out in one go. It was a huge, like, 2 foot mains coming into the building. It took all
Wow.
of the electrics out everywhere within the building. It literally brought that building to a standstill. And we spent most of the weekend. It wasn't that much we could do, kind of reinstatement or
Mm.
maintenance wise. It was more about coordinating, making it safe with the fire brigade, and then some contractors to
Yeah.
start coming in to start removing the water. But the most of our task that weekend was helping find 39 different sets of alternative accommodation. That
Mm.
claim, actually, we got involved in that with our daytime services. That went on for about 11 weeks, I think, before people could even get back
Yeah.
in the property.
And what was the issue? Just fault in the
Yeah, it was the
yeah.
developer. It was the developer. It was an installation issue. It was quite a new building.
I
Um,
see.
and yeah, they found it was a faulty installation on the main incoming cold water main.
Oh, I guess they had to cover up a high bill.
They did.
Oh wow, amazing. And how do you communicate with property managers when it's after hours and if you need to speak to a property manager but you can't because obviously we need to rest.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a couple of things there. Our system automatically provides updates, for our clients, and the property managers get an email. So if they are the type that monitors stuff out of hours, they will know. We
Hmm.
do ask for an escalation point because occasionally, there'll be things that we think our client should know about. I mean, it comes down to it. Sometimes those escalation people don't answer. Um,
Yeah.
not always, and I understand that as well. I mean, we have about a 4% escalation rate, so about one call in 20, something like that. We
Yeah.
need to, because sometimes we just need to tell people, even if it's in just a point of view of like, hey, you might need to go to that building on your way into the office tomorrow because like X, Y, and Z has happened. But occasionally we get some really serious stuff like a death on site or
Oh,
emergency
yeah.
services being called. We've dealt with, you know, uh, the discharge of firearms. We've dealt with stabbings. We have nice buildings too, but
Yeah.
I'm sure everybody knows that these days you can just never quite know. We've had, I guess, one of the other bizarre ones that people need to know about was that somebody managed to take home um, material from a lab that they worked in that was high level toxic. And so we had to tell the property manager that their building had been evacuated by the emergency services, and they had people in hazmat suits going to check out what exactly that stuff was. I believe it was biological in nature.
Wow,
So,
amazing.
so we get, I mean, amongst the lifts and the leaks and the alarms and stuff like that, we get the wonderful. I've gone off on a tangent. What was your actual question?
No, that it was how do you
Oh,
communicate
how do
with
we communicate with them? So, yes, basically, there are occasions when we definitely need to or should do, ideally. If
Mm,
we can't, we have it in our agreements that, and without trying to do the sales pitch too much, I guess that's why people use us, is that we purport at least or think that we know how to deal with most arising circumstances of best practice if we don't. So, if we cannot get a hold of a property manager or our escalation or emergency contact, then we will progress the matter. Leads to some interesting questions about how much we spent sometimes.
mm,
Drains would usually be like that one, if you've got a large drainage issue and you might need to get a tanker to site or something like that. But most companies will give us an escalation which would change from kind of like week to week or something, and hopefully we don't disturb them too much.
yeah. So everyone that works in the office, they're kind of property managers for out of hours
So
because
we have two sets of staff. We have a great inbound customer service team who aren't property managers,
Mhm,
who do the data capture and the triage using our scripts that we've developed over those 17 or 18 years.
mhm.
And they are kind of, yeah, they're customer service people that can be swapped in and out because it is a call center. So we do have people coming and going. But yes, our property management, once that triage and data capture has been done, it goes to the property managers, whose job it is then to decide, right, in this set of circumstances, am I
Yeah.
instructing? And if I
And
am instructing, who am I instructing? And
yeah.
yes, they're property managers. We have TPI people, and for example, and
And
ALA
is there
people.
and is there that like expectation from your side, from property managers to brief you on buildings that you take on? And because we do have problematic buildings and non-problematic buildings, right?
Yes.
And then occasionally something happens, but in general, you just want as much as information as possible then and for the residents themselves so you just know how to deal with. And I'm saying it is in terms of like how can your job be more efficient with the help of property managers is like what do you think it could be done from property management
So we are
like,
literally, as you kind of intimated there, we are literally only good as the information we have. I mean, we might know how
okay.
to deal with a leak, but if we don't know how to access the roof to get
Yeah.
to the roof tank, then we're not going to be as efficient as, as if we know where that code is, or we know that it's, the door to the left or the thing there. So we have an onboarding process that includes that.
Hmm.
Now, as things get, more technologically based and stuff like that, we try and do as much to other people's systems as possible,
Yeah.
and so we have logins to a lot of systems. And also, as time moves on, now we're trying to API with as many systems as possible. Dwellin is one of the main ones that we do at the moment, that we're
Yeah.
doing for clients, and therefore we can pull from their cheat sheets all the information that we need, and we can access, if necessary, resident information as well. And
Yeah.
Dwelling's particularly good for that because you can
Yeah.
access it blind. So I can message the person in flat 3 to tell them there's a leak into flat 2 without even ever knowing who flat 3 is, because we do it blind through their system. So it is all about the information, and
Yeah.
not only the overarching portfolio information. Again, you kind of referred to it. So, this
Yeah.
is, we'll issue procedures and say, this is how we like to do things. And then people will go, well, actually, I'm ABC property management. I'd like to do things this way. That's
Right.
absolutely
Okay.
fine, because no two portfolios are the same. But then, as you rightly pointed out, all buildings within that portfolio might have differences, like the directors this is our preferred plumber, but the directors on this one site fell
Yes.
out with that preferred plumber 3 months ago, so you can't use them.
Yeah.
And things like that. And if we're made aware of that, then obviously we can do things to that, and we'll take issue we'll take information from the macro to the micro. So yeah, this is
Yeah.
our preferred drainage guy, but down on this site here, all jobs are done by this one guy that knows the
Yeah.
building better than anybody else, because that's our instruction. But it all comes down to information.
Absolutely. And obviously we try to obtain as much as we can, and sometimes even directors, and we actually have discovered some access points throughout a job like this just because we did not have any information whatsoever. No one had it. That, I mean, that's the thing.
Doesn't
And
surprise me.
it's like, what do you, yeah. And what do? You just go blind and you just look for, and residents sometimes can be a little impatient because, like, whatever the crisis is in the building, and they have expectations, high
Oh
expectations,
yes.
that it just needs to be resolved now. But how do you go when they cannot be, and patience is something that is very limited in occasions like this, right?
Yeah, and again, I understand why. If you're seeing ongoing damage being done to the property that you live in, and you're waiting for a contractor to attend, then
Yeah.
obviously it is going to be frustrating. But if you live in the wrong part of London and it's early evening, then sometimes people get stuck in traffic.
Yeah.
If unfortunately our client doesn't have a contractor for something that probably should be a contracted service, and we're having to try and find an alternative, then that's going to take time. I mean, it is
Mm.
probably the most usual hard conversation that we have with people. I mean, we aim to get someone to site within 2 hours for everything,
Yeah.
as a general guide. On the plus side, in London and some of the major conurbations, that can sometimes be a lot quicker. Um, Sometimes if you're out in North Wales, or some
Yes.
parts of East Anglia,
Yeah.
or towards the borders in Scotland, or down in towards Penzance, for goodness sake, then sometimes realistically it's a lot more than that, because people are traveling. But
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
that's why we always ask our clients to say, look, if you've got local contractors that know your sites,
Yeah.
will they be available out of hours? And then that comes down to whether
Yeah.
how good a relationships people have with their local contractors, I guess.
Yeah, and contractors are our eyes really on site because they go more often than anyone else, apart from the residents. But they are there and they see things, and sometimes I I feel that they are under pressure because residents are expecting answers right now, and not always is straightforward. And they, instead of them focusing on how to resolve the issue, they need to sit down and speak to someone just because they need to know now. So
But that's the
we,
world at large these days, right? That's everybody with everything, not just property management. Everybody expects everything sorted to their
yeah,
exact wanting
yeah.
within immediately these days.
But it's mainly talking about it and just telling people, please be patient, we are doing our best. But they
Yeah,
not, it's not always that answer is not always welcome.
no, the best thing we've ever found that we can do is regular updates, which isn't
Yeah.
always easy because certainly if we're dealing with all the incoming calls and we're dealing with the trying to place the contractors and whatever, we
Yeah.
don't always have the bandwidth to be able to do that. We utilize uh, just mass text updates quite a lot. So if like 7 or 8 people are affected in a building or calling us about a problem in a building,
Hmm.
and we know that, for example, the water's going to, okay, so there was a leak because the solenoid on the pumps failed or something, and there was a
Yeah.
leak in the plant room, and we solve that. So that's great. That's step one. We shut the water off, so we stop any water escaping. But then we find that we need to go somewhere to go get that part to put the pumps back in, and they're not going to have any water until tomorrow morning or
Yeah.
something. Then at least we learned a lot early on that even bad news, if delivered with an update of what's expected, works a lot better than hiding. So,
Yeah.
like you're not going to have any water until tomorrow morning when the suppliers open and they go to they go and pick that piece up.
Yes.
One, but you can go and buy some water and keep the receipts for that, if that's necessary.
Yeah.
Um it's only it's only 8 hours, so we're not going to start supplying water probably to individuals at that point, although we do a lot of that for longer ones. But we do find if the cold hard truth, as long as it's mixed with, but this is what is going to happen, is
Yeah.
about the best way that we've ever found of dealing with it. But we still go and get obviously people that aren't happy
Of
with that.
course. And how do you deal with when isn't your job or isn't part of the building or like the client's responsibility? How do you deal with these? Because then the contractors are there on the spot and they need to tell the resident, sorry, this is where.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, our triaging and our questioning of people when they call in mean that we kind of most of the time can decide that before we send contractors
Right.
out. So, my bathtub is backing up. Okay, is it backing up of its own accord? Yes. Probably means it's a main stack issue and it is a block issue. No, it happened when my washing machine was turned on. Okay, turn your washing machine off. Does it stop? Yes. Well, that probably means the blockage is internal. So if we are getting a call from a block, that is the internal demise problem. So and that's kind of again, I don't want to do the sales pitch, but that's the kind of expertise that we would add
Mhm.
to the question. So we hopefully don't get to. Sometimes you can't tell, but hopefully with about 70 or 80% of them, we can say, yeah, that's a solely serving issue. I have no
Yeah.
power. Well, actually, does any of your neighbours have this problem? No, I've checked with them all. They don't. If you can get them to check with them, then again, that's an internal issue. But
Yeah.
occasionally, they'll argue the case or there isn't enough evidence to decide one or the other. We try and prepare them by saying, okay, we can send somebody out, but if
Yeah.
it's found to be an internal issue, you may well get recharged by the main office, so
Yeah.
our clients. It's amazing how quickly that concentrates the mind on people who
Yes,
suddenly think,
indeed.
oh, maybe it is my problem then. But occasionally, if it comes down to that the contractors on site, because there was no way of knowing where the
Yeah.
leak was coming from example, and then it's found to come from a washing machine in a flat, then those conversations, actually those more difficult ones, are ended up doing by our client, to be perfectly honest. We'll
Okay,
just
good.
get all the information and it's
Yeah.
you guys that have to do it the next day.
Yeah. You just
But
pass the founding, the finding.
yeah, but we would try and avoid that situation 8 times out of 10 by proper triage and proper understanding
Yeah.
of buildings and responsibilities
And
and
you do
things.
video calls, right? We do video
Yeah, we,
calls.
we can ask for video. We can ask for things. We tend not to do video calls themselves. We have done them. We like to. We find it easier if we just ask for what we need.
Okay.
But 18 years of doing this, our scripts are pretty much
Yeah.
honed to be able to. People say they've got no electricity, but what they actually mean is there's a trip switch on their circuit, and you can talk them through resetting their
Yeah.
fuse board, before we even get to call somebody out and get them back up and running. They say
Yeah.
their boiler's not working. Well, it's a lettings property that we look after, and we'll talk them through repressurizing their boiler because it's pretty obvious that, or it's freezing cold and they've got a condensing boiler, and we'll tell them to go look outside, and they find that their pipe is frozen stiff, and that's what's stopping their boiler. So hopefully we avoid most of those
Yeah.
situations.
But it's also amazing how sometimes these things are kind of like common sense thing that is like, well, why can't you just check ABC before you make the call? But I guess people panic or just really don't know.
It's
And
in my experience, it's three. It's that first of all, people panic, and then like clear critical thinking goes out of the out of people's minds. It's like they don't even
yeah,
think to look for a stopcock, or they don't even think to
yeah,
remember that they have a stopcock. And then we can talk to them and like,
yeah,
do you know where the shut off valve is within your flat? Yes, I do. Well, we'll
mm,
try that first, and
yeah,
great, you've still got a problem because you've got the leak, but at least we've shut the stopcock off for things like that. And I think worryingly, there's quite a little bit of society that just doesn't know this stuff these days.
mm.
Maybe. Um,
So do you think it is for the property managers to keep sending some guidance?
I don't know. There's no easy answer to that. I
No,
mean,
it
there
isn't.
isn't really, is there? Because I
No.
mean, then that gets a little bit like, yes, did you know? I mean, I know
Mm.
some of my clients regularly, especially the lettings ones, send a lot of information out in their kind of welcome packs and stuff. This is
Yeah.
how a boiler works. This is your manual. This is some, links to resources on the internet that shows you how to do simple things.
Mm.
I guess that's why there's a ton of videos on the internet that show you how to unblock a toilet or simple things like that, because people
Right.
just don't know these
Yeah.
days, right?
Yeah. But it's also it just reoccurs like with people even re-renting and rent and living in the rented properties and not even owning a flat is the same. But I I used to be like yourself, like in lettings and sales, and that's how I ended up with sales and LP1 forms into block management. But I know what it's like dealing with lettings and rented properties and tenants. And very often we receive calls from the tenants when they actually are managed by an agent. And I'm like, why don't you call them? And they just simply call us for very similar to what we just discussed. And then you just, you've got recharge the owner. And yeah, it's just one of those things that sometimes
A
I
lot of
think,
education,
how can
unfortunately, is
we,
part of
yeah,
what we do. Yeah.
yeah, how can we minimize this into, like, how can we stop people panic? If that is the case, how do we stop people panic and like think that
Maybe you need to
something can
pass
be
an
done?
exam before you're allowed to rent a property.
Oh,
I
that,
don't think that would ever work, but I'd love to see it.
yeah. I don't think it's a bad idea, to be honest with you. Yeah. How do you repressurize your
Maybe you
boiler?
get a cheaper rent if you pass the exam, because you know
Mm.
how to look after the property that you're in. Maybe you should be like, yeah, if you come with this certification, you should
Mm.
you should actually get a little bit off.
Someone will come up with this with this app or something, Colin, just because we
Maybe.
talked about it, but that's fine. But yeah, it's just again, it's minimizing impacts to the building, but mainly is these type of leaks that are affecting. I can obviously see in the stats is like locks and electrics and stuff like that. But yeah, leaks are a
Leaks
bit
again and
topic.
again.
It build
Yeah, I mean, last year, I mean, God, if you even put plumbing and kind of appliances into it, then we're up over the 12,000 out of our 62,000 emergencies being water related,
Wow,
which is
amazing.
what, one in five. So every fifth emergency that we deal with is an escape of water of some description.
So tell me about
Addy.
Addy, sorry.
Yeah, that's what we got. So Addy, obviously, like a load of people, we've been mucking around with AI, and Addy is our automated kind of property assistant. It's actually in use now. A lot of people are talking about introducing bits and pieces and doing things. We have it live now. there's probably two things to be said about that. One is we never force anybody to use it. So it does the data capture and the triage part that I referred to earlier. It doesn't do
Mhm.
the decision making process, although it does summarize the issue at the end and suggest what it thinks is the best thing to do. But it does basically our data capture and our triage using our scripts, using our million plus emergencies that we've dealt with in the past.
Yeah, you
It
have
sits
data to work with.
We do, and as anybody will tell you, if you're going to build anything, then you need the data. Um, so we've put that to use. We don't force the use of it. We give callers the opportunity to use it, and if they decide to use it, they can. It's doing about 1,500 conversations a month, which is great for us because it's learning some more as it does them.
Yeah,
It gives us the opportunity then to put more resources into the solving of the problems
yeah,
than just the taking of the calls and dealing with the residents. And we're finding younger people obviously like to report this way. And we're also finding people that are English as a second language really like to
yeah.
report this way as well because it's easier for them. The agent basically can speak in any language. So
All
they
right.
find it easy. So, and that at the moment is a chat form, and we have a beta in test version of the voice one, which is the one where obviously is the holy grail of a decent voice agent to be able to
Yeah,
deal with things
yeah.
because more people would feel happier reporting that way. But I think if you are going to utilize these tools, then you have to make it voluntary.
So,
You
so
can't
it's
if you can't
adding an
force
app
people there.
or just on the
No, just
website?
if they decide if a resident decides to report their leak through Addy, they get a choice when they phone in, and if they decide at the moment if they decide they get a link straight to their phone, they just open the link, they're straight in the chat, no
Yeah.
downloads, nothing required. And then obviously the third option we hope within the coming months will be to talk to our agent, and then we're just having like really important conversations about whose voice it should be and what the accent should be. I think it's probably going to end up being Irish because of where we're based. So yeah, so we've got all of that, but it's been fun. We're doing other stuff. We're doing like a lease reading tool, for example. We have that that's working.
Evie.
Yeah, so
Evie.
we're doing that. So we're just having a lot of fun playing around with things, and some of our clients, look, let's be honest, and we all know who they are, the bigger conglomerates out there and the ones
Yeah,
that are aggregating, they have the resources to build their own, and they will build
yeah.
their own, and they probably should build their own.
Oh,
But the
I think
smaller
these AI
companies,
property manager, property assistants will be coming
yeah,
more often than
you
we
have one.
think. We have one. Her name is Lily,
Okay.
and she's very much like Addy. And you have clients do have the choice of either to speak to her or to speak to a property manager, to a human. And so far they prefer to speak to someone because I think the transition it's happening, but slowly. But it is more about, again, as you said earlier, is data. So we are building it in spare time, and it is not like we have a dedicated team like you do. So obviously and I always encourage, even clients, and I've posted it on LinkedIn just because I think is the future, and I think it's going to help us enormously in our day-to-day job. And it's not a decision maker, as you said, but it is kind of navigating the situation to a resource. And it's very important that all the softwares we use have a what was it? IP, the API
Yeah.
that you connect with, because that is time saving. And in all honesty, I've seen what it can do when it's prompt properly. And it's with best endeavors, it's just helping everyone. But they do require a little bit of like residents or leaseholders, clients, anyone who speaks to AI, they just need to be a little more patient. Sometimes they in the tests we had a lot of calls from outside the Ecora, and people calling, and some of the questions that they are asking questions, trying to get her to spill some passwords and things like that. And these are it's a constant learning, right? Because you've got to be careful with what it says. It's access codes and people's data. So
Sure.
we are working on this massively. Firstly, the data, and then the health and safety. But we work in the industry that it is changing, and it will continue changing. And there are a lot of updates, and it's costly as well. It takes time. It requires time. It requires a lot of time to input data and to train like anyone else. You've been property manager for so long, and obviously dealing with Odiva now, and that your training, it continues every day, right? And and that's what it is for AI. They are not, you just don't create them and you expect them that they know everything. But again, this will be a tool that every property management company will have at some point, because
Absolutely.
it is the future when it's used in the best possible way, obviously. But yeah,
Absolutely.
patience, please, everyone, when you're using Addy or Lily or anyone else, any other AI tool. So, and does Addy also, if you send pictures, like photos of issues, and she just
Yeah.
describes?
Yeah, exactly. He can request, pictures or videos, and then he can understand it's machine vision is the new thing, obviously, and it can understand what it's looking at from there, and yeah, sometimes even requests, pictures.
Yeah. And on the human side, um, they're just how does the people in the office that work for Odivo handle, because sometimes the pressure on the other side of the call is quite high. How do they handle pressure?
Yeah, I mean, it is a difficult one. No one ever phones us no one ever phones blooming block management companies whenever everything's all right, but they only ever phone us when they think they've got an emergency, whether they have one or not. In fact, it's actually a lot easier if they have got one, because there's no explaining it's not our problem or it's not an emergency. Just easier to go, yeah, actually, we can deal with that. That's not too much problem. So
Yeah.
it's actually the ones that aren't the emergencies that sometimes are bigger problems. Um, but it's kind of what we sign up to do. Unfortunately, every call of ours starts, with people reporting something that they think is extremely serious, which is why we cut things into the property management and the customer service
Yeah.
people. That's why we have the customer service people that do the initial call, because I don't think you need to leave the two different, because it is pressured.
Yeah.
I don't know if we've ever found an absolute answer to that.
Probably not.
We try and make the job as easy as is possible, but then again, it's not, because not only is it always emergencies, we work some very odd hours,
Yeah.
obviously,
Yeah.
and we work weekends, and we work bank holidays, and we work Christmas Day.
Yeah.
Um, but I guess I just have a bunch of resilient staff, and it's not for everyone. It's the
No,
honest
it's
answer
not.
as well, and people find out it's kind of self-selecting sometimes, because people find that it isn't for them, but other people seem to relish it. It's quite weird that
Yeah.
you see
Well,
people that can.
I think it's all about the relationship between the property managers, the residents, the leaseholders, the contractors, and everyone else that is involved in block management. It isn't easy, and we need to work together. So patience is very much needed and wanted and required, because understanding is what will lead us to a better workflow and a relationship throughout, isn't it? Um, what what keeps you going, really? You know,
I think, without trying to be too kind of like mushy about things, I think what we do is a good service for property managers, because I think it allows people not to be on call, and we allow people to be shut all over Christmas if they want. Properly, I was
yeah,
there, I did it for long enough.
yeah,
It's a really hard job, and I think the one thing that keeps us going is knowing that we allow people then to be able to turn off their phones until the next working day, or turn off their phones for the weekend, and not have to worry, and be relatively assured that unless something really left field happens, that they're just going to come in, the next working day and have had an issue happen
Yeah,
but dealt with. And I guess that's what keeps us going.
absolutely. And if you could improve one thing
Mhm.
about the industry and
Yeah.
how it handles out of hours support, what would it be?
So it'd be, you mentioned it before, it'd be as many APIs between as many systems as possible so that everybody could just grab any piece of information to make job quicker and better. So if we could grab from every platform that was out there,
Yeah,
information from a building, if we could grab from every contractor's platform all their information and pull it back in, which is stuff that we're working on. It's the quality of information. It's that
absolutely.
one thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I think we can continue talking. This topic is not ending for the moment, and I think there is a lot to be said. And I really hope that we will find a balance in all parties working together and you know build continue building and maintaining these beautiful buildings across UK and Ireland and everywhere else, really. But they do need maintaining and they do need understanding. Property management is not it's not quick and easy. Out of hours is a lot. It's a lot to understand of what is required. People are, like we mentioned earlier, under stress, impatient, and we just need to work together as a whole. So thank you very much for being the guest of Tales of the Block, and it's been great pleasure speaking to you today.
No problem. Thank you very much for having me.